We were really spoiled in September, at least the we of us who are dark fantasy fans and use D&D Beyond, or not, to be fair, because these books actually came out on both. So, at the beginning of the month, we got the Grim Hollow Player's Guide, which featured not only a new class, but 40 subclasses, a plethora of new spells, and even some cool transformations to use as well. On the final day of the month, we also got the Grim Hollow Campaign Guide, which is the GM's version of the book, although really you need both, but that's a whole other thing. But this one is less about the player options and more about how you can build a campaign within this setting. Make no mistake, this is not an adventure book. You do not get a specific adventure with this, but it does give quest hooks and all the information you could need to homebrew your very own campaign, which is exciting. It also gives over 100 magic items, which is absolutely preposterous. So I thought it would be fun to go over a little bit of everything within this review video, and then you can figure out if this is something that you'd be interested in. I, spoiler alert, like it a lot. I think I prefer the player's guide, but that's purely because I'm a big mechanics head rather than a lore head. But I will be diving into this more and more over the coming months, as I am running a dark fantasy kind of homebrew, as I am running a dark fantasy adventure anyway for some of my players, with tying in some parts of the Crooked Moon, which I also adore, and probably parts of the Grim Hollow universe as well, because they just make sense together, you know? The Grim Hollow campaign guide is split into 4 parts. The first part is all about the world and the lore of the world itself. It breaks down not only kind of the history of Etharis, but also goes into the specific factions within it. Not the factions, the specific empires within it as well, like the Burak Empire, the Austrian Empire, the Valican clans, and so on. Within each of these, it not only gives you a geography, but also the history, the provinces within it, and some really cool quest hooks that you can use. It also has a list of notable locations and important NPCs you can use, giving you kind of everything you need in order to build your own campaign, which is sick. Part 2 is all about the Denizens of Etharis. This goes over not only the heritages that you can build and also kind of what they mean and what they're all about, but also the factions within Etharis, like the Company of Free Swords and the Eppin Syndicate. These are going to be really, really helpful if you're looking to build political intrigue and drama into your campaign. Part 3 of the book is Divinity and Magic. While magic is slightly different in Etharis, the real draw here, for me at the very least, is the focus on divinity. The divine in Etharis are very much not these noble, humanoid beings. They are these unknowable things which just happen to exist, and I think that's sick. It also goes over the primal magics in Etharis, which is really useful if you're looking at the transformations, because a lot of those are fey or primordial in nature. This is also the section with the absolutely preposterous list of magic items, and we will be checking out a few of those because it just makes me happy. And then finally, part 4 is the Game Master's Guide. This goes over scale and kind of how you can progress things, the kind of encounter difficulty you should be looking for, as well as going over new rules that it adds that you can staple onto your campaigns, like wounds and new conditions. It also gives some information on the curse monsters, which are the majority of the more interesting stat blocks that this book comes with. My one real complaint about this book, and it's a pretty minor one, is that it doesn't come with enough monster stat blocks. This is not a monster book, though. This is a campaign guide. That is not unusual for D&D, and ultimately you can always reflavor stuff anyway. So, not the end of the world, just I feel like I'm constantly talking about how much I love everything instead of making any real criticisms. So, that's my real criticism. That was it. Enjoy. We're going to take kind of a whistle-stop tour through these things. I don't want to focus too much on any specific thing because there's just too much to go through. So let's just kick off with some chapter 1 stuff, shall we? As ever, I adore the artwork in these books. I just think they're absolutely glorious, and I think the people at Ghostfire Games do a fantastic job on both the writing and the art front, which is not a surprise given how much experience the team has. Chapter 1 is the overview chapter, basically. It's telling you the vibe of this, where, it's literally the world is broken, the gods are dead, magic is mistrusted, humanity is flawed, and there is hope within the darkness. I feel like that's a really important part of the campaign guide, because while this is dark fantasy, it's not grim dark, not really. It's still about finding the heroes within this kind of dark and gritty world, it's what kind of marks it apart and what makes it really relevant to D&D. Well, you can run Cthulhu by Torchlight is a great example. You can run these horror campaigns within D&D. It's generally better suited from a mechanical sense to go for the heroic fantasy, which is why it works. It's why D&D is what it is. And I think putting this little bit in there is really important to remind people that that's the case. You can absolutely run this as a, mind-blowing horror if you want to, but mechanically, D&D always fits better as heroic fantasy, even if it is peppered with darkness. Chapter 1 also gives an overview of the various realms within it, which basically all led by various different monstrosities and horrors, generally speaking, which is a lot of fun. It also explains that while there is history within the book and there is lore within the book, nothing of it is set in stone because stories are not always accurate. And I think that's really important because it gives you, the GM, a lot of space to play in. You've then got chapters 2 through 8, which all cover individual places within Etharis. We'll go over one of these quickly, just to have a look. Quickly, that's the same thing, but here we are. It kicks off artwork again, glorious. It explains basically some of the history of that area and also the geography. So it explains, the Burok Empire landscape has changed greatly over many years. Covered in a vast and deep forests, the tree line recedes ever so slowly to quench the Empire's constant demand for lumber. While efforts to maintain the forests have proven effective, there is little that can prevent the Empire from one day taking more forest than they plan to return. So this is a progressive nation, basically, a progressive empire. It talks about the specific areas as well within it, so you split it into 4, which is great. And then it talks about the different landscapes you might find. We also go over the history of each individual place and also specific areas within these, basically the cities generally that you're going to go. Each city then also lists the notable individuals if you're looking to run NPCs that are true to the setting, and also why they're notable and what they're after as well. To get through all of that, look at that, man. It's just glorious, right? It then goes over the quest hooks. These are ideas. You can absolutely take these wholemeal, and that's absolutely fine. But these are inspirations for you to take. It talks about aberrations, usurpers, the sacred groves, the specific areas. Look at that, man. I love this setting. And more. And I think that's probably one of the most important parts of it, because a lot of times when you're looking at a setting, it can be tough to figure out. A lot of times when you're looking at a setting, it can be a little bit tough to figure out where to start. So these as starting points are excellent. That is basically true of all of the different areas of all of the different realms, and I think it's solid throughout. You get all the information you need. There's no set in stone maps is the only issue I have. I don't think there is. The 9th chapter is all about the timeline, and it goes over different things basically that happened and the order in which they did happen, which is great if you've got players who are just the most lore fanatical players you could ask for. I know some DMs really like having set in stone things to go with, and it also gives you the potential to set things within these different massive relevant things, so during specific wars or anything else like that. It's useful. It's the kind of thing I wouldn't pay a huge amount of attention to. It's the kind of thing I wouldn't pay a huge amount of attention to in my own campaigns, but that's purely because of the way that I tend to play D&D, which is where I don't tend to run campaigns set in big historical moments, because I like to focus on more kind of localized, specific heroic things that might be, never uncovered because they were solved, things of that sort. But that's just the campaigns I've run so far. We will see. I'm sure I will end up with some preposterously overpowered thing at some point, but not in the current one I'm running, because I'm finishing it soon in the level 12, so we haven't hit, demigod status just yet. Part 2 of the book is all about the peoples, of which there are so very many. I like the fact that Etharis splits up heritages based on kind of how likely they are to be found. It's really useful as a DM to know how you should or shouldn't be treating different species, if that's something you want to do. So all of the ones that are common, they're the ones that are going to be seen quite often, and then you get the less common ones, and it explains story hooks that you can use for different species as NPCs, but it also gives a lot of really cool information for the players if they're looking to make sure that their characters tie in properly. I'm a big proponent of really tying characters not only to the world but to the stories that you're telling, and having these kind of things, these prompts within it, is excellent. It really helps ground everything as you need to in individuals, which is always good. You've then got the eldritch ones, which are the ones where, you know, you can have a bad time, basically. But again, these have the descriptions of what it is that you can use them for in different campaigns. I have an Arisen character coming up that I'll be playing actually in a campaign soon, which I'm really excited about, and it's really nice to have this information as a way to pull more lore and more backstory into that character, you know? So this is, while it is obviously for the DM and the GM mostly, it's still nice to get all of this extra information as a player as well. So yes, the factions section is essential if you like playing these big spanning stories, and I think a setting like this where everything is inherently kind of morally grey, having a bunch of factions is a necessity, because players shouldn't be 100% sure that one faction is correct and one faction is wrong. It should be a nice porridgey mix of what it is that they should or shouldn't be doing. Fully picturing the imaginary food and Hook in my head for some reason. But I think that this really helps. The summary is excellent for people with attention issues that might have problems reading the whole thing until they need to, whoever that might be. It also gives some tips on how you can use them, which is really cool. And then it goes into the specifics, not only of what it is that they might be working on, but also goals, who's leading them. It's just everything. And again, more quest hooks. You also get a few stat blocks in amongst these as well, which is useful if you are running them as villains, basically, or as potential villains. We're now, I told you we were going to do a whistle stop tour. We're now at chapter 12. This is where we're talking about the arcane magics and why people might not be as keen on magic as they are in some other settings, as well as different regional attitudes towards magic, colleges specific to it, and then also some information on the planes. I also really like that once again you get this specific kind of pop out of what it is you should be trying to use different planes for in dark fantasy, because it's not as common as it would be obviously in a more high fantasy heroic vibe where you're popping in and out of the Fey realm as you like. It's really summarized in this last paragraph. In a dark fantasy story, the planes serve to explore themes of cosmic horror and existential dread more than providing exotic locations to visit. There are no welcoming cities or safe havens in the depths of other realities. The planes are not a frontier for exploration. They are a terrifying and crushing ocean threatening to drown the material plane. A reminder of the insignificance of mortal existence. We love a little bit of existential horror and philosophy within our setting guides. What a joy. It then gives obviously information on the specific planes as well as areas within those, and a few that you might not be familiar with because you shouldn't be. The point of a setting guide. It also talks about the specific divinities and how the gods kind of work within this. Again, just gorgeous artwork there. Raph Lomerton, good work. It talks about the big events within these as well as specific people within it as well. So you've still got like Zabriel, and they're all very, I mean, they've done a great job of naming them in a way that makes them feel like they should be actually set in stone religious figures in old myths or anything else. It talks about the Seraphs and the Archdemons, which are kind of the main ones, and then it also talks about the other kindred are very much the Eldritch ones. We love some Eldritch stuff. Yeah, the magic item section is, as I said, absolutely massive. There is so much stuff here, and then you even get a few artifacts and what they do. The artifacts are great because they work in a similar way to the way that the transformations work, which is to say that as you become more attuned to these, the items get stronger, but you also gain a curse. So with this one, this is Damglsphere, I'm going to go with as a pronunciation there, which is a gleaming blade, basically. As at the first level, it gets a +2 to bonus attack rolls and damage. Any weapon you wield also deals an extra 1d6 force damage, but you become Paladin of Ill Health, which means you have disadvantage on your Constitution saving throws. As you become more attuned to it, you get more benefits. Creatures hit by the sword can't regain hit points until the start of your next turn, and when you take the attack action, you can hit everyone in your attack range instead of just one creature. However, doing so, every time you hit a creature with the sword, your hit point maximum is reduced by 1 until you finish a long rest. And then at Master rank, when you hit a creature with a sword, at Master rank, when you hit a creature with a sword, you can attempt to slay it instantly if it has 100 hit points or less. The creature makes a DC 20 con save. On a fail, it dies. On a success, it takes the normal damage. You can do this once per long rest. However, after you hit with a weapon, You can't regain hit points until your next turn. Instead, any effect that causes you to regain hit points during that time grants you an equal number of temporary hit points instead. Now, that's not the end of the world. You're still getting that health, but it's another aspect to that curse. I just wish there were more of these, because these are excellent, but I understand that they are literally sacred artifacts, so I get it. I do understand why. I just love this style of item. Let's go over a few of the items, shall we? Let's go with the arc rifle, because I love a pew pew. I also love these flavor texts. I asked the gnome if it was safe. He said, define safe, then the lightning came, and the bandits didn't. Perfect. This is a very rare, wondrous item. In the unforgiving lands of Etharis, having reliable and efficient weapons is as essential as carrying water and food. In that regard, skilled inventors are highly sought, and among them, gnomes are the most renowned. However, innovation can sometimes go too far, and the arc rifle is a perfect example of how. The part science, part arcane contraption is a rifle-like weapon housing glass tubes of sparking electricity and powered by a small perpetual motion device. Invented by a team of famous gnome engineers, it literally shoots lightning, hitting the target faster than other missile weapons and reducing the flesh to ashes in mere seconds. Due in part to this tremendous efficiency, the weapon was quickly declared illegal in most regions in Etharis. It is also believed to destroy the target's soul when it kills them. The rifle has 4 charges. You can expend 1 charge as a magic item to launch a torrent of lightning in a 60-foot long and 5-foot wide line. Each creature makes a DC 15 dex save, and on a failed save takes 4d6 lightning damage, or half as much on a successful save. It then regains 1d4 expended charges at dawn, and if you expend the last charge, you have to roll a 1d20 with a 5% chance of it becoming useless, basically. I really like that this is a magic weapon that isn't a weapon. This is an item that is a weapon, so you can just have it. You don't need proficiency with this. This is just an item that anybody can use, which kind of shows off why it would be so terrifying to have a lot of these running around. It's cool. You've got lots of flavor items in this as well. Blood Capsule is a cylindrical flask etched with arcane runes that can store enough blood to sustain a vampire for 1 day. So instead of a ration, basically. You've also got just so many horror items in here. Cloak of the Listener. This is a cloak made of ears that were once part of a swarm of ears. It pulses gently and oozes yellow fluid from its many holes, and while wearing this cloak you can take a magic action to create one of 2 effects. Ooze. You tug the cloak to create a puddle of waxy goo that covers the ground in a 10-foot square, centered on a point within 30 feet of you. A creature that enters or starts its turn there must make a DC 15 dex save or have the grappled condition. The wax remains for 1 minute. Or hide. You completely conceal your head with the cloak. I do not know why you would want to do that. You have the blinded condition. You have blind sight within a range of 120 feet. You can hear all speech within 120 feet of you, regardless of obstructions. These effects last for 1 minute. Once each effect is used, it cannot be used again until the next dawn. This is not an attunement item. This is a horrible cloak of ears that just is. How you want to describe this to your players is entirely up to you. You could have this as just looking like a normal cloak until closer inspection, and then you notice all these holes and the fact that everything looks a bit like an ear. Or you could just go all out and be like, it looks like a bunch of ears stitched together. Have fun. Pretty grim either way. They've also got, where is it? Touch dagger? No, it's missed. There are also some items that can tie into the transformations that you get as a player. These help give more upsides to the transformations because the downsides can sometimes feel a little bit harsh. I wish that there were more of these for all of the transformations. I could only see one, for example, for the Seraph transformation, whereas there are a couple for the Aberrant Horror, but that is just me. You can always use these as inspiration, ultimately. So let's talk about the Fin symbiote, because it's one of them. The tendril of flesh harvested from an aberration melds with the body of its host. If you're a humanoid, you can attune this item by stitching it into your skin during the attunement process. At the end of this time, the fin burrows into your body and bonds with your muscular system. Non-humanoids cannot attune to the Fin symbiote. While attuned to the symbiote, you gain the following benefits. You get advantage on con saves. If you are moved against your will, you can take a reaction to subtract 10 feet from that movement. If you have achieved at least stage 1 of the Aberrant Horror transformation, you add a +2 DC to the save DCs of your horror boons, and you cannot voluntarily end your attunement to the item. If it is physically removed from your body, it regrows in 1d4 hours unless you receive a remove curse before it grows back. Isn't that great? You've also got a lot of consumable items, which I think is really useful. It's something I don't make enough use of as a DM. I am working on it. Flammable tincture is an example of this. The swirling mixture of red and white liquid is formed from the remains of a cold fire ooze. As a magic action, the vial of flammable tincture can be hurled up to 30 feet at a target, which must succeed in a DC 10 dex save or be covered with a liquid. For the next minute, the creature loses its immunity or resistance to fire damage and has vulnerability to fire damage instead. The dex save is preposterously low for this. Makes it unhelpful unless you're in you've got a bunch of them, or you can force the low dex save. I don't dislike that because it's an uncommon item. It's just my thoughts on it. You've also got things, I like how specific some of these items are as well. Iron Fangs is a rare item which requires attunement, and it gives you a +2 bonus to your attack rolls with your bite attacks. And your bite attacks can either deal force or piercing damage. It's really simple, but it's very effective, and I love that. The Rod of the Packmaster is a really cool one. It's another one that kind of works with the transformations. The rod appears to be a piece of driftwood carved with images of wolves and bears. While holding the rod, you can take a magic action to cast Polymorph on any number of willing humanoids within 30 feet of you. The only forms for each target are black bear or wolf. The target retains their intelligence, charisma, and wisdom stores, and the effect lasts for 24 hours and requires no concentration. You can take a magic effect to end the effect early for any number of targets. Once you do this, you can only do this once per day, basically. And if you have reached at least stage 1 of the lycanthrope transformation, you can hold this rod in your teeth and use it while in hybrid or kindred form. It's just cool. Damn it, love it. We'll do one more item, shall we? Sunglasses, sunshades. These black leather goggles are set with cloudy glass that completely obscures the eyes of the wearer. You can take a utilize actions to take these on or off, and while wearing these, you ignore your sunlight sensitivity as well as any other ill effect you would suffer due to the exposure of sunlight. These goggles also block your dark vision, preventing you from seeing in the dark. I love some sunglasses. It's cool. Due to the sheer volume of magic items, you would have to pay me a substantial sum of money to go through every single one of them and talk about it in a video. I'm not doing it. You can't make me. We then reach the final part of the book, which is the Game Master's Guide. This talks, which is funny because it's the whole book is a Game Master's Guide. This is the part that gives you all the tools, basically. It gives you a description of different styles you can use: grimdark, horror, dark fairy tale, sword and sorcery. It's cool. We love to see it. Talks about conflict resolution, the scale of different conflicts, how to run a party, the world itself, whether or not you should be milestone or goal-based progression, and also encounter difficulty. It explains a little bit about how you can tweak fights with more hit points or fewer hit points or adding more monsters, which is cool. And it talks about situational challenges as well, like difficult terrain or things of that sort. It also talks about adding monsters and waves. So this is kind of a good section for tips in general for D&D GMs, which is great for all GMs really. Here we've got new rules for the rests. Basically, a short rest is no longer 1 hour. A short rest is at least 8 hours instead. You sleep for at least 6 of those, and you can do light activity for 2 of those. And then the long rest, it suggests being 32 hours, which I think is perfectly reasonable, to be perfectly honest. I like that it splits these up quite a lot, to be honest. This isn't something I'm especially interested in running in a lot of my campaigns, but I like the fact that this forces downtime. It can be really good if you're running a survival campaign or things of that sort, or obviously if you're running a Grim Hollow campaign. We also get rules for grievous wounds, as well as a table for what could possibly happen to those wounds. A table for permanent wounds, which is good because one of my players just chopped his arm off in one of my games. New conditions and what those conditions do. I wish there were more conditions in general. I've talked about this before, but I gave one of my players the ability to set things on fire with his fire spells and kind of slow them down with his cold spells, and it's something I'm considering implementing at a game level with what things can do, almost like weapon masteries for spells. From a balance perspective, I don't think it's a great idea, is the issue I have. But from a fun perspective, it's something that would happen to everything. So if you're hit with a fire spell, you do set on fire. The issue is that there are spells which specify that, and then you have to kind of grapple with that. But it's something that's percolating in the back of my mind. I'm also half considering elemental reactions, Divinity or Genshin Impact, but I don't think I'm going to do that because there's just a lot of stuff. A lot of interaction to consider, and my brain, she no good. It talks about great beast mutations, which is basically, did you encounter an eldritch horror? Congratulations, you get to do horrible things, like growing a third eye. Some of these are good, some of these are bad. It's cool. I like it a lot. It then has rules for natural diseases, talks about legendary foes and how you can do it, as well as specific things. It actually talks about legendary actions you can add to creatures, and I think that's amazing. And it talks about the heroism and corruption. This is I'll just read the thing. Though the gods of Etharis are gone, the Weave of Fate still governs the lives of its inhabitants. Without oversight, however, the once indomitable force has become unstable and susceptible to outside influence. The interplay between heroism and corruption plays an important role in the lives of the people and the creatures of Etharis. This is handled by Resolve dice and Beast dice. When playing in Grim Hollow, the players and their GM each have a pool of 6-sided dice to draw upon in order to shift fate in their favour. These players' dice are known as Resolve dice, while the GM's pool consists of Beast dice. The dice in each pool can be spent to activate a number of different abilities representing different ways in which the fate has been altered for good or ill. At the start of a campaign, each pool contains a single d6, but these can go up or down as things go. At the end of each session, if either pool has two fewer dice than the other, the GM should add 1 dice to that pool. This represents the fate attempting to correct the imbalance. So this would be like if players keep critting, you could get... It's kind of like the hope and fear system in Daggerheart, and I think it's cool to have that in here as well. It talks about what you can use these things for to remove an exhaustion level from a thing, to gain extra health, to fix a death saving throw, to just gain a non-magical item, which is really cool. Do a Blaze of Glory to get advantage on all d20 tests and resistance to all type of damage, which is sick, but that costs 6 Resolve dice. And then for the Beast pool, you've got Bitter Disposition. You can decrease the starting disposition of an NPC to from friendly to indifferent, or from indifferent to hostile, to make a player immediately fail a death saving throw, things like that. It's cool. I like it. I like it a lot. It's also then got general ones that you can use it for. So this is kind of the congratulations, we've added more rules to your rules. And while I think that's a lot to handle for new DMs, I love stapling on other systems to my D&D. It's the reason Heliana's Guide to Monster Hunters is one of my favourite books. It's also the reason why I love all of this third-party stuff so much. I love augmenting the base version of D&D into something that fits my scratchy brain a little bit better, and also appeases my players, because I'm very lucky to be in a group which loves anything I throw at them, more or less, and I love them for it. We then, basically, the final section is these curse beasts. These are things which can occur if you curse someone, or you might come across these. It's a transformation that could end up happening to a player as well. These are all unique stat blocks which have, again, horrifying artwork, which we love, along with unique abilities and specifics on what would happen to them or how that could happen. And then we've got credits, which are important, because a lot of really, really, really clever people worked on this, and I think it shows. That is it for my kind of overview review of Ghostfire Gaming's Grim Hollow campaign guide. I think this is another home run for Ghostfire Games. I also think we're really lucky to have both this, and I think we're really lucky to have both this and The Crooked Moon come out in the same year. Both of them are phenomenal books. Both of them, or 4 of them in fact, there's 2 books apiece. They're just incredible. The settings are incredible, the design is incredible, the gameplay mechanics, the new items and everything. I think we've been really spoiled this year from the third-party space, which is good, because the first-party space stopped existing when Forge of the Artificer was kicked back. We're only a few weeks away from new first-party books now, though, which is good. And obviously we have had the announcement about the last digital DLC for the Forgotten Realms as well, which I have thoughts on, which I might make a video on, because as a Magic the Gathering writer, as someone who writes about it as a living, basically, I do have thoughts on how the MTG D&D crossovers work. But that's for another time. For now, if you enjoyed this, I would just be so overjoyed if you wouldn't mind subscribing and leaving a like or a nice comment. Also tell me what you think and whether or not you'll be picking this up. I will be back when I'm back every Monday and Thursday with a review, an interview, or a build guide. We'll see what happens. But until next time, do take care of yourselves. I will see you then. Goodbye.